FOS TV is brought to you by the Lion's Den. The Den always has been and always will be about enjoying family and friends in an environment steeped in Happy Valley tradition. So come back to the Den, the perfect place to recall old memories while creating new ones.
Northwestern coming in here is the best team that we've faced. Pat's done an excellent job there of just, putting an excellent team together, an undefeated team, and we've got a huge challenge ahead of us on Saturday.
Mark Brennan of Fight On State here with Greg Pickel for our weekly Bill O'Brien press conference wrap. A little rainy out on the field here. It's Tuesday at Beaver Stadium, so we're setting up outside the locker room. Locker room closed for 30 minutes after the game. I assume that's when Bill O'Brien's laying into the team if they lose and giving them compliments if they win. Bill O'Brien talking about going to the Northwestern game off of the big Illinois win, really trying to keep this team on an even keel, not getting too full of itself going to a game against a pretty good 5-0 Northwestern team.
Yeah, he complimented Northwestern numerous times, but he also gave us a little bit of an insight into how he approaches his team's morale during the week. He said he gives them their day off on Sunday, and that's when they can get their pats on the back. And then on Monday, they start off by looking at what went well, and then they look at what went wrong, and that even keel is what he's looking for, and it seems like he's found it so far.
Yeah, obviously this isn't a Northwestern team that anybody wants to look past. Listen, I get that, their victories aren't against powerhouse teams, but they have an unbelievable offense, put up, 700 yards of total offense. Coulter's a guy who's done a lot of different things for them. A lot of the focus in this week's press conference, up until this point, it was usually looking back at the previous game. This week was the first time that most of the focus was on looking at the next opponent. Right. And clearly, Coulter is the guy that everybody's talking about. He'll play quarterback. He'll run the ball, and the key, I think obviously everybody realizes this, is containing Kane Coulter.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that we talked about this a little bit on the boards, and Bill O'Brien talked about it, not necessarily specifically so, but he's another Tyler Tettleton type, and maybe even more so. He's another Chris Coyer, maybe even more so. He gets out of the pocket and he makes things happen, and the backup Trevor Siemian, who is the passer when Coulter lines up at wide receiver, is no slouch either. So when you look at Coulter, you need to contain him or you're going to be in for a long day, and I think Bill O'Brien realizes that. And Northwestern's good on the ground too. They give you that dynamic threat of the fact that Coulter can run, but so can their running backs. And you combine that, and it's really going to be a challenge for this Penn State front seven. And there's no doubt it's the biggest challenge they're going to have so far this season.
It's funny because it wasn't all that long ago that people looked at Northwestern really not as a running team, as more of a passing team, and that's been completely transformed the past couple of years. From Penn State's perspective, good news from Penn State's perspective, we don't have to give a lengthy injury report or injury update. One thing that kind of jumped out at me is he said, Bill O'Brien said that he thinks Pete Massaro is going to be back. Stephen Obang is going to be fine, but the fact that at this point, again, we're taping this on Tuesday, that it looks like Pete Massaro is going to be back. This is going to be as healthy as they've been all year.
Yeah, and you can't really underestimate or understate the fact of Pete Massaro is back. The way Coulter plays and the way this Northwestern offense plays is fast and up-tempo. Bill O'Brien had said that he believes they'll try and run 90 to 100 plays, and you need everybody you can get defensively when you're playing a team like that. So I think Pete Massaro being back is huge. You don't know how many snaps he's going to get. Maybe he gets 10, 15. Maybe he gets the normal amount. But it's the fact that this team, like you said, is as healthy as they've been all season since the opener, and that can only do good things against a strong Northwestern team.
Yeah, one of the more interesting press conferences, it was kind of going along, and there wasn't a lot, he wasn't really talking about a lot, and then he was asked a question, Bill O'Brien was, about recruiting. Mm-hmm. And boy, he took that as an opportunity to give his best Penn State recruiting pitch, knowing the sanctions and the scholarship limitations they're up against. He went off for, a good couple of minutes at least, basically giving reporters his recruiting pitch. I saw you were tweeting about it.
Yeah, he just basically said what he's been saying all along, that you're going to play in front of 100,000. He made a point that a lot of people were disappointed with the attendance numbers, that only 95,000 showed up, and he made a point that, and you could tell it was in his recruiting pitch mode, the fact that there's not a lot of schools that get 95,000, even that every week. He talked about the fact that every team has had an NFL scout in for practice so far this year. We've seen that at open practice. There's definitely always at least 7, 8 scouts there. And he talked about the coaching staff and what they do. He went a little Denny Green and pounded the table. So, it was a very good pitch for O'Brien, and I think that he's smart to use this opportunity to show recruits and just people in general watching this program. He said he's talked to non-Penn State people who enjoy watching this team play, and I think it can't hurt him to use this platform to get his message out. The more you get it out, the better it's going to sound, the more you hear it.
Yeah, now obviously he has an agenda, but if you think about it, the fact that this team's been on national TV every single week, that definitely says something. And the other thing that he said is he's getting calls from a lot of, he called them quote-unquote non-Penn State people, telling him how much they're enjoying watching Penn State play. And I would have to agree with him. I think after struggling a little bit in the first couple of games, this team has played with a lot of heart, a lot of character, very tough. As he said, they play like their hair's on fire. Right. He doesn't have much hair to be on fire, but some of the other guys do. But, you know, I think, again, that goes along. He was also talking about the leadership, a lot of questions about the leadership from Mike Motti. And I think that all kind of comes into play, that they are putting a pretty good product that's fun to watch on the field out there so far this season.
Yeah, I think so. I think you'd be remiss to say you're not at least entertained while watching these games, win or lose, Penn State fan or not. There's a lot of interest from this team just watching and see how they do, and they don't disappoint more often than not. I really found interesting the part about the Mike Motti conversation. He said the first time he met Mike was after his opening press conference. That night he held a team meeting, and he said the first question Motti asked him was about the new strength and conditioning program. So I think that relationship, you know, we hear about it every week, Mike Motti and what he's doing on the field, but that little bit of an inside track, I guess you could say, to the relationship him and O'Brien had is sort of how it started. I just felt that was one of the neater parts of the conference.
Yeah, and let me add a little bit of clarity. He didn't ask about the new strength and conditioning program. Mike Motti asked about his philosophy on strength and recruiting. And the reason that's important is because the old strength and conditioning staff was still with Penn State at the time. Right. They had not been let go. And the reason I think that's important is because clearly, you know, O'Brien came in with a philosophy of what he wanted to do from a strength and conditioning perspective, but he obviously talked to the players about what they wanted to do, and it sure seems to me as if the way they went with more Olympic-style lifting as opposed to the old HIIT type stuff, if you're getting that sort of feedback from the players, that it's kind of tells you why they ended up going in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you think back to the winter and to the spring, when all these guys wanted to talk about was this strength and conditioning, I don't think you get that excitement if they weren't at least consulted or at least felt like they were a part of the process and were looking forward to something new, to something like this. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that he definitely addressed them and talked to them about it. And I think it was a team decision. We keep hearing one team, it's beaten into the ground, but in that sense, it seemed like everyone was on the same page as to what they wanted to do with this strength and conditioning program, and it seems to work well so far.
One of the other things, and Bill O'Brien, we're starting to see how savvy he is at spin isn't the right word, but taking a question and kind of veering it in the way he wants it to go. There was one reporter was asking everybody about this student, you know, whiteout that they're trying to get going, and O'Brien basically said, listen, whatever, whiteout, I don't know, whatever they call it, he wants the students to be there. It's a noon kick. And he basically made a plea in front of all these reporters, and everybody was tweeting it. Again, I saw it as soon as he did it, that the students are in the stands at noon for this game. Yeah, you are a student. I mean, that was, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think the exact quote was, I don't care if it's a whiteout, this out, that out, I just need him in the seats by noon. And he was very, very strong about that. And I think he knew it would get out there on social media pretty quick, the fact that he said that the players obviously thrive off of the added students, and I think he also knows that Penn State doesn't have the greatest reputation for being in the seats at the student section by noon. Let's be honest, they just don't. So especially the homecoming game against Northwestern, usually this is a game that may not get as much attendance, but this Northwestern team is certainly not what we've seen in the past, and I think it was an interesting plea, and I think it was definitely, again, spin, like you said, isn't the right word, but he definitely took the opportunity and made the most out of it.
Well, having been around here quite a few years, I would tell him that he should have added something else, that the students should be in bed by midnight if they hope to be in, because I think that's what's going to play into it. I think that may be a little bit of a frustrating effort for him, because I've seen it years and years and years. Big opponents, not big opponents, but listen, if he could pull that off, he really is, you know, he really is a genie. He keeps saying he's not a genie, but he is a genie. Anything else newsworthy jump out at you?
No, not really. I just think the biggest thing is that we spent probably at least 4 minutes, 5 minutes of this video in the past talking about injuries, and we talked maybe for a minute. This team is healthy, and when you think about Donovan Smith, it was bad that he didn't get to play, and it maybe hurt this team that he wasn't able to play against, you know, Temple and Navy. But now you see that he's back and he's healthy for Big Ten play. That's where you need him. I mean, you can't win the Big Ten, but you certainly can win the division, whatever it's worth. And this is the play you need him. This is when you need Donovan Smith to go against these better defensive lines, and I think that's a huge part of this, the fact that they have no injuries to really worry about going into this game.
Yeah, and just to add on that, we have some noise here because they're doing some construction here in Beaver Stadium, but just to add to that, it also helped the depth of the offensive line significantly, and to carry that over, you know, when Bill Belton was out, O'Brien talked about at the beginning of the season, he thought this could be a 20, 25 carry a game guy. He switched that. With Belton out, they've had some other guys really step up. We saw it with Zach Zwinak last week, and he's really come on. So that's some of the stuff that came out of the Bill O'Brien press conference. Thanks for joining us again, as usual. I'm Mark Brennan. This is Greg Pickel. We're outside the locker room, and we will see you back here again next week. Thanks, everyone.